Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics and Random. Berto Will is your host. Thank you so kindly for being a part of the show. We are going to have a great show for you today, but I want to start with a little personal story because it's going to sound offbeat first till it joins up to what I'm trying to say. When my father died 10 years ago, but before he died, there are two specific incidents that I remember. Two specific incidents. And the first, when I was back in college, University of Texas in Austin, I remember he came to visit me from Panama. And the first thing that he said was, those were the times that I was very active in the movement to liberate, to get the universities and other folks to divest their money. But before I get out, folks, please go ahead and share this right away. Please share this on your walls. Please share this on your pages, everywhere else. Please go ahead and let's make sure that people get to see these things. But anyhow, so my father came to visit me in Austin when I was in college, getting my engineering degree. And he said, I was marching with to liberate South, take the money out of South Africa. We were trying to get rid of apartheid and all that kind of stuff. And I remember him saying, you're not coming here to liberate anybody. You're coming here to get your degree. You're coming here to be an engineer. And we got into it, and I got real mad. And I said, one of the problems we have is if more of us had stood up, instead of, just letting folks take advantage of us, things would be different. And, we got into this big argument. And then he said, and also, if I had stood up that much with you in Panama, because I have to remind you, in Panama, there's a place called the Canal Zone. And all the Panamanians wanted to work for the Canal Zone because the pay was better. That's working for the Americans. The pay was better and all of that. So that was a coveted job. But, as Panamanians and as people of color, in the 60s and 70s, those Panamanians who worked for the American government had to take a lot. They took a lot of okay? Think about what they take here in the United States. Take it an order of magnitude when you're talking about people that are not U.S. citizens. They are foreigners. So they took a lot. And I always, in those days, I was always pissed because I was always militant. How dare you take these kinds of stuff from these people, How dare you for the American government holds down Panamanians when there are the riots that's occurring or all that kind of, how dare you? And my father said something that kind of stopped me like a rock then. He said, if I hadn't done some of those things, I wasn't overtly militant, but if I hadn't done some of those things, you wouldn't be here at the University of Texas getting an engineering degree. And that stopped me like a rock, right? After all the fighting and the arguing or whatever, I stopped like a rock because, if he's dead or he's not there, that all the pathways that got me there would not have been there. But that's sort of on an individual basis, right? So I stopped there and I had to do a lot of self-reflection. But then later on in life, by the way, my father was always very supportive of me. When I started my software company, when I left NASA and I left all these big jobs for doing things on my own or whatever, he would, when other people in the family weren't right there on backing me 100%, he would always tell me things like, hell, you're doing it for somebody else. You can do it for yourself. Go for it. One of the reasons I've always said, no matter whatever I got up and did, I was going to work my ass off, no matter what it takes, because I had people who believed in me. I had people who trusted me. I had folks who, like I said, we're from Panama, man. And when he said that, I was like, oh man, there's no failing there, baby. But we had another fight, and it covered the same thing. It covered me again fighting the system. And one of the things that he said is, why are you fighting for a whole bunch of people that don't give a damn? In other words, it wasn't so much as you've got yours, just deal with it. It wasn't just that. It wasn't just you've got yours. And my green screen is messing up and I have to try to figure out what's going on. But it wasn't just that, right? He said it. Well, so we got into this argument, and I'm like, yeah, but if again, I said if you were doing, and then it came back to me, I shouldn't really be telling him if you had done this because he was right. The pathway that I took was based on the decisions that many times he made. But still, it irks you. Why did I bring that story up? With all that's happening with the coronavirus, and you're going to see some of the things that we talked in the interview with Rabbi Michael Lerner. I sit down and wonder, he's talking about how do we get other people involved? How do we get people to really feel a part of a system where they can make a difference? You have to have some of us that are willing to go out on a limb. Because most people, just like he said, a lot of people would just say, I've got mine. I'm comfortable. I don't really have to do anything else. I am comfortable. And those are the people who ultimately become the guardians of the gate. Those are the people who oppress for the oppressor. Those are the people who are doing all the oppressive work needed by the oppressor. Okay? So my thing is, when I look at what's going on with the coronavirus, when I see that many of us are fighting for Medicare for all, but we don't have the push of a lot of people. And this afternoon, I interviewed somebody who has a real story that I'll be playing tomorrow. But when I see that, my question is, what is it going to take for us to really start to get people involved in their own well-being? And Dr. Rabbi Lerner kind of said something that I've been saying. You guys have heard me say on this show before. But as a psychologist and other, he is able to kind of say what the metrics are or how the metrics work. That causes that we have to do as progressives, those of us that are progressives, that we have to be able to do to let people know it is comfortable to do the right thing. We have to be able to get to folks, it is okay to do the right thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the video, the interview that I just did earlier this morning, and then we'll have a few minutes to discuss this on the other side. So let's go ahead and beforehand, let me just welcome Michael Rudnin, welcome AVQ, Norman Reynolds, and Wesley Wayne decided to switch from Twitch to YouTube. Come on, I thought you were going to build my Twitch people out there, Wesley. Come on, man. I thought you were going to start saying, hey, people at Twitch, let's start jumping on this bandwagon. Great, great. All right, folks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play that and we'll take it on the other side. Welcome. Welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right, an American political activist, the editor of Tikkun, a progressive Jewish interfaith magazine based in Berkeley, California, and the rabbi of Beit Tikkun Synagogue in Berkeley. We are with Rabbi Michael Lerner. Rabbi, how are you doing this morning?
Pretty good. It's a cold day in Berkeley right now. It'll get warmer later, but right now it's well, I just came back, so I'm walking my dog, so I'm going to take off my mask here.
All right. Well, it's great to see that we have, even though right now California is exploding, nice to see one of our good old activists out there wearing that mask as he walks his dog. Anyhow,
I am an old activist. I hate to admit it because I still feel like I'm 30, but
well, we're all old activists now, I mean, the new ones are those Gen Zs who they don't take anything, It kind of brings you back to the old days. You remember those old days?
I do.
Well, anyhow, let me ask you, Rabbi, why don't you, before, tell our audience a little bit about who you are, because you've got some history.
Well, I'm 40 years old. I was born in 1938. 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 Well, I started as my activism at age 21 when I came to graduate school at Berkeley, where I earned a PhD in philosophy. And in that, then I was on the executive committee of the free speech movement. And then with my roommate, Jerry Rubin and I created a variety of events, one of which was the first large teach-in against the war in Vietnam. And then another teach-in that we did the next year on why white people should be supporting Black power and not be afraid of Black power, but should be actually supporting it. And I went on from there to become active in virtually everything in Berkeley until I went to become a visiting assistant professor of philosophy at the University of Washington, where I got indicted by the federal government, by the Nixon administration, after I had organized a very large demonstration against the war, and that that led to well, the police attacked that demonstration. It was at the federal courthouse building, and there were hundreds of police. There were a few thousand of us, but hundreds of police suddenly appear and attack us for no ostensible reason, because all we were doing was standing outside the courthouse. We had said to the judges we wanted to go in and do a teach-in about the way that the courts are being used to suppress the anti-war movement. Anyway, the police then started following the demonstrators, throwing tear gas, and by the time the demonstration was over, I mean, the police had thrown enough tear gas to make it impossible for anybody in downtown Seattle to work in their buildings. Everybody had to go home because it was tear gases. Anyway, I got indicted. I was sort of the main figure because I was the professor at the university, and most of the demonstrators were students in my classes. So, and I had the biggest set of classes at the university. So, so I got indicted for the crimes. Listen to this. The crimes were conspiracy to destroy federal property. Why conspiracy? Because I hadn't destroyed any federal property. But they said, well, the paint that was thrown on the courthouse windows and some rocks that were thrown against the courthouse, that was this thing that I supposedly conspired to do. And using the facilities of interstate commerce, in my case, the telephone, with the intent of inciting to riot. Why intent? Because I didn't incite to riot. They didn't have anything. So they said I had the intent on that. Anyway, that trial, which was called the Seattle 7, ended with when the U.S. court, the case against us at the federal courthouse totally collapsed because under cross-examination, one of the many people who had infiltrated our organization, I mean, it was as today, so then your organization was filled with people who were actually working with the police or FBI or whatever, but pretending to be demonstrators, but then trying to incite others to do so. So one of those people on testifying against us admitted under cross-examination that the FBI had paid for the paint that was thrown on the courthouse.
Wow.
And that the FBI had brought the rocks, because there are no rocks in downtown Seattle.
Right.
It's all you know, where were we going to get rocks from? They brought it there. So their case falls apart, and then they decide, the judge, on a lame excuse of us coming into court late, declares a mistrial and sends us to jail for contempt of court. So off I go to Terminal Island Federal Penitentiary. We were so popular that particularly me and one other of the defendants, so popular with the people in the state of Washington, that they believed that McNeil Island Penitentiary couldn't hold us because people would come tear it down. So they sent me and Chip Marshall down to Terminal Island Federal Penitentiary in San Pedro, California, down south of LA. And while I'm there, thinking, and this is for a contempt of court, which is supposed to be bailable.
Right.
But okay, actually, you don't need to hear this whole story. Anyway, that's when J. Edgar Hoover made this statement that Michael Lerner is one of the most dangerous criminals in America, so he shouldn't be allowed to be released even to come to a hearing about the legitimacy of the contempt citation. Anyway, the court didn't listen to him and eventually overturned the contempt citation. And then years later, the federal government dropped the charges because, of course, they had no case. But they succeeded in doing what they tried to do, which was to defeat us. I went on to get a second PhD in clinical psychology, and because I wanted to understand what was happening in the country and the psychodynamics of people that was leading them towards the right at a time when their economic interests were with the left. And that led to, amazingly, I was granted an NIMH, National Institute of Mental Health, research study in which I was the principal investigator. And we interviewing people and creating support groups for people to understand what was going on in their lives, and in particular, what was leading them to move to the right. Well, I did that for 10 years or so of research, and with thousands and thousands of people. I wasn't interviewing them all. I had a team of researchers. But what we discovered was something that was very hard for us to believe at first. And that was that actually people were moving to the right, not because they agreed with the politics, but because they felt dissed by the left. They felt put down by the left.
Explain, Rabbi, explain what you mean by put down by the left, because those are the same dynamics that's occurring today, and it's something that I like to preach on. So explain to people, because when folks watch me approach the right, and really they think I'm coddling a lot of these people to the right, which is not about coddling. It's about exactly what you said. So please explain that dynamic.
Well, see, what they were telling me was, so this is counterintuitive to what the left always taught about people. Because what the left teaches is a form of a Marxist reductionist, materialist reductionist conception of human beings, which is basically that human beings only care about economic matters, material supports. And they would use, for proof of this, the levels of that a psychologist had developed, that there were levels of need, and that first you had to satisfy your material needs, and then you could go up a ladder of needs until eventually you got to something like psychological or spiritual needs. But what we were finding was, of course, people need material well-being, but many of the people that we interviewed or were part of our groups, because about half of them were people of color and half were white, and many of the people of color were telling us about something that I can then found out was true by other researchers, that in poor communities, that people often are willing to sacrifice their material goods to give to other people who are also suffering materially, who don't have enough food, that people who don't have enough food themselves share with other people. And then I learned that the same thing had happened in the concentration camps where Jews were put in, that people who were close to starving to death were nevertheless sharing the littles that they had, the crumbs that they had, with other people, because they had a need not only for material well-being, but also to care for other people. This need to care, and as we explored it further, because one of the things that people kept on telling us was, the liberal progressive world I was part of it at one point. I liked it. I thought it was a good idea. But then I heard so much anti-religion stuff. I heard them make, for a while I hung out with them. This is the kind of stories I got. For a while I hung out with them, but what I heard was, number one, that they would say that they thought that they wanted us working class people in their movement, because they needed us for demonstrations, and they needed us to go vote the way they wanted. But when you'd hang out with them, they would make comments that made it clear that they thought that we were on a lower level of development intellectually and psychologically than they are, and that they hoped that as long as if we hung out with the elites of the left long enough, we would evolve to a higher level that they were on, in which we would recognize that all the religious stuff that that if we go to church, that's all baloney, that there's nothing there that's of any value, that we're just, that you have to be stupid to believe any of that stuff. And we got the sense that they actually have contempt for our culture. They put us down. They make, so after a while, that became the main concern for many of us of, that why should we hang out with or trust people who actually look down upon us, who think that, so, I mean, if we jump far ahead to 2016, and you hear, if you're somebody who's not on the liberal left, and you don't hang out with them anymore, which a lot of working people who used to did, then if you want to hear what the main spokesperson for the liberal left world is in 2016, it's the person that they selected to be their candidate for president. Well, what does Ms.
Clinton?
Yeah, what did Ms. Clinton say? She says, "Oh, those people, half of them are a bundle of deplorables." Well, that little message, which we had already learned was what people thought 30 years before, okay? But that message was then replayed and replayed and replayed in every right-wing radio station, in every television station, over and over and over again, till people felt like, namely, hey, this is what she thinks. You're all deplorables, okay? And so when we did some after the election interviews with people, we heard this often, that part of when we'd ask them, well, who did you vote for? If you voted for Trump, why? And they said, because I'm not a deplorable. Okay.
Right.
But see, that wouldn't have had that power if it hadn't had a long history of people in middle income working people having a sense that the people on the liberal world and the left have contempt for them, look down upon them, even though they want us, to demonstrate with them and vote with them. They think that we're stupid. So as we explored this more, what we discovered was that there was the hunger for, number one, for some sense of higher meaning and purpose to their lives. That's what led them to churches, but the left thought that was ridiculous. That's some part of religious nonsense that has to be discarded. And we also heard at the same time this saying, and what we want is respect. We want to feel that people respect us and think that we're okay. And yet we get the feeling from the liberal and left culture that that although they know that it's the distribution of wealth is unfair in this country, and they want to struggle against it, simultaneously, for at least the people in the top 20% of income earners, privately don't really engage in that struggle very hard to redistribute to redistribute wealth. They are focused on issues of identity politics, but they're not focused on redistribution of wealth. And part of the reason for that is that they actually believe the central self-justificatory message of capitalist society, namely that the economic, the inequality in economic well-being, that is both in terms of income and in terms of wealth, is a function of a meritocratic society in which you can make it if you really try. And consequently, if you haven't made it, it's probably because you're not smart enough, or you didn't work hard enough, or something has gone wrong. You screwed up your life. Now, as we studied more and more and more, we came to realize that almost everybody in the society believes in the meritocracy. They believe, now for the top 20% of income earners, that feels good. They say, yay, this is a society that recognizes how terrific I am. So I deserve what I have. But for the other 80% are feeling terrible about themselves, in great pain. And this because they feel that the ways that their life isn't working is purely their own fault. They don't recognize. Let
me tell you why I want to stop you there, Rabbi Michael Lerner, because you are almost detailing your new book, called Revolution Love, a political manifesto, heal and transform the world. And the reason I'm saying that, I haven't read the book in its entirety. I just got a chance to scan it through. But the table of contents is interesting. You started off in the first part, transcending the crippling dynamics of oppression. And then there's some things that you're saying now that I think is probative. A world of huge pain, a hunger for love, which has nothing to do in general with those who proclaim to be progressives. That sort of never factors into the thinking. And when you talk about people want to feel more than just economics, that is what you're talking about as well. Then you talk about the fear and domination and love of generosity. You spoke about that when you talked about people, even poor people that have next to nothing, they're willing to provide others. It is sort of intrinsic to humanity. And then toxic self-blaming and powerless. I'm going to add something to that you maybe want to add to the title, and that is of the 80%. Because what you're talking about there is you're saying, wait a minute, the 20% really think the meritocracy is real. The 80% also think the meritocracy is real, and they are failing. But the truth is, it is not that they're failing, is that our system has made them to fail. So please expand on that.
Yeah, exactly. You see, the ethos, the central ethos of the capitalist marketplace is look out for number one. Everybody's out for themselves. Nobody will care about you. You've got to do what you can to advance yourself. And wherever you end up in the society, both in terms of your economic well-being, but also in terms of your relationships, is nothing but your own fault. And by the way, this message gets reinforced by a pop psychology or a pop spirituality.
Explain that. That's very important what you just stated there, sir.
The pop psychology and pop spirituality says, you've made your own reality. You create your own reality. And therefore, it's up to you. You're on your own to transform your life, and we can help you. Now, look, I'm a psychologist. I'm not just a rabbi. I'm also a psychologist, right? And that's how I study.
That's the reason I keep saying Dr. Rabbi, because it's like, am I talking to him as a rabbi now, or am I talking to him as a doctor, you know?
Okay, I'll tell you something. These 2 PhDs I have, that plus $5 gets me across the Bay Bridge.
Talk to me, brother. Talk to me.
So, okay. I mean, not that I didn't learn stuff. I did. And I had this great opportunity to study psychodynamics of American society so that I know what I'm talking about, because I didn't make this up in my head.
You also live it. That's the important thing. You also live it. You see it.
Yes, right. And I've spoken to and interviewed and had groups with people, thousands and thousands of middle-income working people. So people, I continually meet people who say, oh, no, that's not true. But okay, anyway, here's the truth. The truth is that there are a set of economic structures that are justified daily by the notion that you deserve what you get, and you cannot. And although there is some mobility for about 1 to 2% of the population over the course of the past 40 or 50 years, this a study done by New York Times in 2008 showed that the tiny percentage of people make it out of their class situation. But for most people, they are not only stuck in this situation, but they feel, because they've bought into the meritocratic fantasy of this society, that you can make it if you really try, and they end up feeling terrible about themselves. They feel, and so bad, and so much pain, that most people repress this. Okay, repress this information about themselves. They don't realize how much they're blaming themselves, but they do feel terrible. Now, sometimes it's impossible to avoid it, avoid the self-blaming coming to consciousness. And in that situation, people do anything to push down the pain. They try drugs, they try alcohol, they try right-wing religious communities. I'll get to that in a second.
May I add, doctor, yes. In this case, doctor, may yes. I add that even racism is a function of that.
Yes, absolutely.
And that is the reason when I say to friends sometimes that some of my good friends are racist, and they're like, how dare you stay with that person? And I'm like, remember, racism is also a factor of capitalism. Exactly. And that is something that was needed. That was something that was learned, doctor. Now,
right.
And the reason I broke in here and I wanted to kind of transfer this into overcoming the dictatorship of capitalism, the capitalist marketplace, because that lends into that.
Yes. Well, okay. So I want to say one thing about what you just said and then go into it. So the one thing I want to say is when people go to right-wing churches, they get something out of it that's real. The right-wing churches tell people, don't blame yourself. It's not your fault. And that has tremendous relief for a lot of people. If your life isn't working, don't blame yourself. Reduce that. Reduce the blame. And that feels so good to people that they're then willing to listen to the second part of the message, which is, it's not your fault, it's the fault of, and this is a universal message. Every country where you find a right wing, this is the same thing. They pick whoever is the demeaned others of that society and say, they're the cause of it. They're why you're. So in Europe in the first half of the 20th century, the primary demeaned other were Jews. So you're suffering because of Jews. In the United States, the primary demeaned others traditionally were Native Americans and African Americans, and they still are. Okay, but now the right has added on to them a whole bunch of others, including all feminists, all gays and lesbians.
Liberals,
liberals and progressives, immigrants coming into our country. All of these things are now the source of your pain. Well, why do people buy it? Because it feels like a sigh of relief that they don't have to blame themselves. And the great tragedy of the left is, because it's ambivalent about struggling against capitalism, it doesn't take on this most important psychological struggle, which is the struggle against self-blame, and to tell people you are not at fault for the pain in your life. Now, as a psychologist, I know that we all contribute somewhat. I wrote a book called Surplus Powerlessness, in which, there's real powerlessness, and then we add a little bit more on our own. That can be cured with therapy. Yes, that's good. But still, the tremendous amount of powerlessness that's out there. And I'll just give a very specific example of that. When people say, okay, I'm doing fine at work, but my relationships aren't working. I come home and my partner isn't really giving in a generous and loving way to me. Or I come home, my kids are looking at me and saying, what have you done for me lately, daddy or mommy? They're looking at me as though I'm supposed to deliver to them, for them, endless of something. Okay. and never satisfied. So people then feel terrible about themselves. Another part of the story of why they feel terrible about themselves is that they feel they're failing in their relationships, or single people who can't find an appropriate partner end up feeling like that they're blaming themselves. They don't understand that the reason why there's so much selfishness in the society is because everybody is indoctrinated by it all day in the world of work. Day in and day out, the ethos of the capitalist marketplace is look out for number one, and everybody's out for themselves. And then if you go home, you turn on the television and the same message is coming to you in every possible form. Almost every sitcom has as its hidden assumption, well, of course, everybody's out to maximize their own advantage without regard to the consequences for other. And even in childhood, they have these comic things that kids get to watch when they're 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, and they're all about one animal beating up another animal. Okay,
It's fun.
There's going to be some. I talked about this to Hollywood, to some of the moguls in Hollywood, and they told me, you know what? I won't let my kids watch the kids shows
that we produce.
We put on our own.
It's amazing. You know, I call the whole system, right, antiseptic slavery. And the reason I call it antiseptic slavery, some people get upset because they said, how dare you mix what's going on now with the real carnage that happened during slavery? And I'm like, carnage is not only physical, carnage is institutional. And what I said is, it's interesting. These guys are professional slave makers. Why are they professional slave makers? Because the people that are now slaves don't even know they are slaves. Exactly. Because we can dangle a whole bunch of money in front of you or not. We can do whatever we please. But you know what? You're disposable. The old slaves we had to take care of because we had to clothe them. We had to make sure they had some modicum of health. But now we don't have to do that. You can't produce, we throw you away. We don't have to keep you healthy. We bring the next one in. Beautiful. Look, we're running a little bit on time here. So I want to ask you a few very important questions. You said overcoming the dictatorship of the capitalist market. Tell me two things. How to overcome the dictatorship of the capitalist market, and what are the institutional changes for building love and justice? And by the way, folks, this is all in his new book, Revolutionary Love, a political manifesto, heal and transform the world.
Right, published by the University of California Press.
Right, I'll have the link and everything in the blog post.
Yeah, so what I want to say is, number one, we need to advocate, the left needs to advocate, the liberal world needs to advocate for a new bottom line. Right now, every institution, every corporation, every government policy is judged efficient, rational, and productive to the extent that they maximize money and power. We are saying in what I'm calling a love and justice movement, and our organization is called the Network of Spiritual Progressives. But not spiritual doesn't mean you have to be religious or anything like that. It doesn't mean you have to believe in God. It just means that you recognize this other dimension of human needs. A new bottom line that says that institutions, corporations, government policies, our healthcare system, our educational system, our cultural systems should all be judged efficient, rational, and productive to the extent that they maximize love and caring, kindness and generosity, ethical and environmental sensitivity, enhance our capacity to respond to other human beings as embodiments of the sacred, and enhance our capacity to look at the earth, not simply in terms of what we can turn into a commodity and sell, but to look at the earth with awe and wonder and radical amazement at the grandeur of this universe. So it's a whole different way of thinking. It's a way that if the liberal and progressive world, most of the people in the liberal and progressive world are there in part because they want that kind of a world, but they think nobody else does, and they think that it'll make them look silly if they talk about love, kindness, and generosity. But these are the things that people are hungry for, and the left agrees with it, but never talks about it. They instead show how tough they are and how their programs are economically work and so forth. Well, I, of course, support the economic needs, but you have to speak at a different level also, this other level. So this is this first part of transforming the society, is that we have to win over a liberal and left to a new way of being, and not just articulating it, but being it. We need a liberal and progressive world that feels caring towards each other, first of all. they don't feel caring towards each other, not just among the different organizations, but even within the same organization. I've been involved for 55 years. I've never once been at a meeting where after the meeting, people were inviting each other over, caring for each other, wanting to know if they're physically okay or they're psychologically okay, caring for other people. That doesn't happen as part of the ethos of the liberal world, whereas it does happen in the right wing, particularly in the right wing churches. I've gone to right wing churches, and immediately people are saying, "Hey, anybody in your family sick? Is there, do you have a place?" I go to right wing synagogues, and people said, "Is anybody in your family need a visit? We'll go there, or do you have a place for lunch? We'll take you home, bring you home to lunch." We don't have that ethos in the left. We don't take care of each other. We have these mass demonstrations, but never a time in which people say, okay, we're not going to talk right now. We're going to ask you to talk to each other, get to know other people that you don't know yet. It's a lonely world. Get to know other people. We want to help make connections between people. So I'm saying both. We have to articulate a new bottom line of love, caring, kindness, and generosity, and simultaneously live it, embody it, so that people feel when they come to a liberal or progressive meeting or a demonstration that it's not just about the correct points we have to make, it's also about caring for each other.
Rabbi, I am trying. I go to all these different progressive organizations and the meetings across the country. And that is something, I first of all, I want to commend you for putting it all together in one place in a book like that, because I think it is so important. That is something that I feel many of us sort of on the fringe within the movement are trying to embody. But I think you've come together and put it all in words, something that we try to do and express to others when we are approaching the other side and saying, that is the reason we don't have them. Because if we promoted what you're talking about, along with the policies we support, there is absolutely no way we are not the ones where people want to gravitate towards. Now,
Yes.
let's then close out with one particular issue. A guide, and we have to shorten this one out. A guide for how progressives can transform July 4th into Interdependence Day. Give me like a 3, 4, 5-liner.
Okay, it's very simple. If we want to make fundamental changes, and in my book, I talk about an environmental and social responsibility amendment to the US Constitution that would, amongst other things, require that every corporation get a new corporate charter every 5 years that they could only get if they could prove a satisfactory history of environmental and social responsibility to a jury of ordinary citizens getting testimony from people all over the world about that corporation. I've got lots of other concrete things in case people are thinking, oh, he's just talking about love. No, I also have a very radical program that goes far beyond what most of the left talks about. But to get there, we need a whole different ethos of caring. Now, one way to show that we're not on a higher plane, is let's take July 4th. And instead of looking down on our neighbors and putting them down for observing this their holiday, we should say, yeah, we'll use that opportunity to put forward a slightly different spin on what July 4th should be about. You're talking about Independence Day. We're talking about Interdependence Day, that we recognize that we are dependent on every other person on the planet, not just ourselves and not just the people we know. We're really interdependent with everyone else, and we're interdependent with the planet itself. So we're going to celebrate July 4th, but in a whole different way. And so also on our website, Tikkun, Tikkun.org, Tikkun is the name of the magazine I edit, but Tikkun.org, Tikkun.org, we have details of how you would run a picnic. This year it would have to be probably a picnic online in a Zoom call. How you would run that in a way that focused on our interdependence with each other, but still celebrating some of what's good in America. We don't have to put down everything about the United States to be able to be loyal to our progressive ideas. We can also recognize that there was an advance in allowing some limited democracy for some white people, that then got extended slowly and slowly and slowly to some other people, first to men, and then first to women, and then now to African Americans. And yes, we know the right is doing everything it can to stop people from voting, and undermining that, but still there were things won. And so here we have in that that article that you'll find on the website tikkun.org, I lay out some of the things that we can be grateful for. For example, the struggles of working people that actually got some rights for people. A 40-hour work week as opposed to an endless work week. Now, in my book, Revolutionary Love, I call for a 28-hour work week. So 4 days a week, because so that we have a day that is totally available to us to care for each other and to not have to work. But anyway, yes, we have to celebrate that which is okay and let our neighbors know that we're not looking down on them for celebrating, but we'd like to invite them to consider our interdependence with all other beings and our interdependence with the well-being of the earth. And so take that day and make it transform its meaning in the ways that you'll read if you go to that website.
I'll post that on Dr. Rabbi Michael Lerner. It has been my pleasure. There's so much information in that head of yours. We're going to have you back again so that we can extend on that. So it's been my pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much. It's fantastic to meet such an ally, because we clearly are on the same wavelength.
Thank you, Doctor.
God bless you.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. I sure did. Now, look, first of all, I saw some comments in here. The first one I want to, first let me welcome Melissa Noble, welcome aboard. Mike Cisak, welcome aboard. Well, I think I spoke to Rodnan already. Para ver. Okay, Bruce Ballard, welcome aboard. May Wood from Long Beach, welcome aboard. Norman, I think we spoke to. Para ver. And yeah, okay. Now let me take what Melissa had to say first, because Melissa said he makes many good points. However, he is making a skewed, very unfair generalization. I understand what he's doing there as far as the unfair. I don't agree that it's unfair generalization, because he talks about something that I've seen quite often as I go out there with liberal organization, and I think it's a good observation. I think many of you have heard me say that I've gone to Tea Party events right here in Houston and some crazy parts of Houston as well, to some Tea Party events. And the one thing those people wanted to show me, I mean, I know it's not, a lot of times it wasn't genuine, but the attempt is made to make you feel welcome when this stranger comes in, you know? It's kind of like what the Bible or the Quran or the Torah talks about, right? But when you know, like I do go to all, in fact, I'm going to one online in the next few days. Netroots is not going to be meeting in person this year. It's going to be online. But what you do find is we are a bit more antiseptic and to the point. And there is an aspect of, there's an aspect that we have to start getting into that reach people. I think Thomas Frank wrote about what the hell is wrong with Kansas, or what's the matter with Kansas, or something like that. And he focused on similar issues as well. And I think it's something that, as opposed to looking at it as a slight against progressives, because Brother Rabbi is as progressive as you can get. He's just as left as I am. So, I mean, I think instead of looking at it as a slight, we look at it as something that we need to do ourselves for some kind of improvement, because I think improvement we could use. Okay, let's see. Melissa says, I've seen it too, but he's focusing on one aspect. I have seen it on the Republic. Yeah, I get it. But the question is, you know, I am, as an engineer, you know, I like to look at things called results, right? And one of the reasons you don't see me getting super mad at my right brothers and sisters is, again, results, right? There's something that they're doing that's able to garner those people that we aren't. That's the bottom line, results. There's something that the right wing is doing to that allow people to vote and do things against their own interests that we are not doing. And therefore, I think then it means we have to look within to solve our problem. So it's not about, let's see, ironically, the peace and justice group need to work in their in their hostile behavior. I'm not sure I understand that one, Melissa, but I'll take it. Luan Gauthier Thomas says, what a delightful man. He brings up several good points, and you have to ask yourself, if we're going to win people over from the right, we need to think about a lot of the things he brought up. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying as well, Luan. If we are not making the sale, and that's what I tell a lot of progressives, right? And a lot of times we don't want to hear that. Making the sales means not only showing folks that mathematically speaking, our ideas are better, but how can you mathematically prove an idea is better and somebody run off and go somewhere else? We are not making the sale. And that is what we have to work on. And look, there are a lot of externalities. There's more money on the other side to create perfect lies, to create ways to change people. There's a lot of that. I'm not denying that at all. But we have to be careful with that. Egberto, you don't look at results. Welfare has destroyed black... CSAC, the problem I have with a lot of these arguments, you're like Candace Owen. You take statistics, and there's some truth to the statistics, but you don't look at the underlying feature about it. What I tell people all the time is, when you look and you say, oh, racism has destroyed both black families, not racism, welfare. Well, under your pretext, the same would happen to the majority. Welfare is a majority white institution, right? Majority of white people get welfare. If I were to listen to what you're saying, you would also be saying that welfare is destroying white families. Because the same laws that apply to black families on welfare is the same laws that apply to white families on welfare. The only difference is that on average, there's a larger, while there is an order of magnitude more white people on welfare, there's a larger percentage of black people on welfare. So whatever destructive means the implementation of welfare has will then be magnified in the black community. But I then always tell you, look at the resemblance between the Appalachia, the ghettos, and the barrios. So Mike Cisak, my brother, your simplistic argument basically takes on a racist tonality because you're not looking at the numbers to tell a whole story, but to affect a particular populace. Try to get what I'm saying there. Okay, and then if you look at it from that point of view, you'll understand what I'm saying. Not because your numbers are correct mean that how you got there is what you're thinking. It's very, very important to understand that. Let me jump up and see if I get somebody else. Bruce Pollard says, Tikkun equal repair or fix. I like that. Based on what I've read, mass flatten the curve. It may not be the only contributor, but it would be warned. Yeah, of course, mass flatten the curve. If you're throwing out less, it's common sense. If you're throwing out less particles that somebody else is going to absorb, of course it helps. Now, there are other issues. The inside of that mass, if you have coronavirus, is going to be infected, right? So you also have to talk about washing your mask or whatever. But still, if people are not touching your face and you're stopping the flow of particles in the air, of course it makes sense. Of course it makes sense. Okay, let's see what else is here. Rudnin says, no, that's a reply that Rudnin is doing. I want to get a message. A sweet idea. The left should embody love and caring, kindness and generosity, ethical environment sensitivity, that people and the world are sacred. Exactly. All right, let's see. He's not completely wrong on religion. Religion is something that you can't say is right or wrong. I'm a humanist. Am I supposed to say Christianity, Islam, and Judaism are all wrong? Hey, I don't partake of any of them. But I suffice it to say people do as they please. All right, let's see if there's anything else. Para ver. Norman says, I think that real empathy works for making sure independents and progressives stay engaged, but my experience to date with Republican whites do not emote empathy with people without any shot at the meritocracy. Norman, I may have to reread that statement because I don't know if I can agree with that when most of the people who follow the right have not benefited from the implied meritocracy. Because if you take a look at Trump's base, we just have to see how he defines it. I love dumb people is what he says. I love dumb people. And for the people who buy his Kool-Aid, I don't call folks dumb, but for people who are buying his Kool-Aid, those are the same people who have not benefited from this so-called meritocracy. So we'll have to kind of expand on that in another time when I have more time to see if I understood what you're saying, or maybe I need to look at it a bit differently or what. Let's see, I got to go, but let me see if I need to grab another quick one here. Para ver. Okay, I don't think I have any more. All the other folks have either answered, Rudnan has taken care of, or otherwise. Anyway, folks, please do remember this is a political show that requires or needs or asks for your support. So please remember to go to patreon.com, patreon.com/politics done right. Again, that is patreon.com/politics done right. I'm going to put that donation link in the stream right now. So please be sure, if you have the wherewithal, to please subscribe via Patreon, patreon.com/politics done right. Alternatively, Facebook has started accepting we can now take subscribers on Facebook. So you can go to our Facebook page and just click on subscribe, or you can click on the link that I just put in there, which is facebook.com/become supporter/politics done right. Again, that is facebook.com/become supporter/politics done right. The other one is paypal.me/politics done right. Notice I give every option to make it easy for folks to say, yes, I want to support Politics Done Right. If you're on YouTube, you can give us a super chat by just hitting on the $ on Facebook and provide a super chat of your choosing. And then we have our store.politicsdoneright.com. And in our store, we have As I See It, Class Warfare, the Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom, which talks a lot about the economy as I see it, as many progressives see it, and as the things that we really need to do. And of course, for those of you who know I've had my weight problems, to lose weight and be fit, now you can get that directly at our site, or you can also get it at Amazon. Amazon sells our book, but again, we get the full thing if you get it directly from us. And of course, we got our cups, and we have T-shirts. Yesterday, the last couple of days, I wore the Politics Done Right T-shirts. I hope you like those. Consider getting them. Go again to store.politicsdoneright.com, and this is how my store look. I don't turn it on much earlier because I notice it has been crashing the system every so often. I wish Stream, what is this? Telestream would get this thing right. Sometimes it causes it to crash. I don't know why. Anyway, folks, I thank you for being here. I know you have other options for being here with us. I hope you enjoyed the show. I'll go process it to take sort of the beginning and the end out and stick it together. My name is Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right. And you know how I end this, baby. I am what? Out! I'm Egberto Willies, host of Politics Done Right, an independent news program. I post several news videos of interest every day. I ask you so kindly to subscribe to my channel, and please leave me some comments. Thank you very much.